Welcome, everyone. Good evening, or whatever time it is where you are. I'm Susan Deutsch. I'm the program manager at the Muse Writer Center, and we are so happy to be hosting Chase Folmar's book launch. Housekeeping notes real quick. If you would like closed captions, you should be able to enable them at the bottom of your screen in Zoom or on Facebook. Those are available. They are automated, so they might not be the most accurate, but that is a resource for you. After the reading, we will be having a Q&A. So if you look at the bottom of your screen in Zoom, there's a Q&A section that's specifically for questions. So if you are watching live in Zoom, feel free to pop your questions in there at any time, even as they come to you during the reading. If you're watching live on Facebook, you can put questions in the comment section on the live stream, but do keep in mind that comments from within Zoom take precedence. And that is about it for housekeeping. In case you are unfamiliar, the Muse Writer Center is a 501c creative writing nonprofit. We're located in Norfolk, Virginia. As you can see, though, we have gone online. So we have virtual, hybrid, and in-person events that allow us to reach a really broad swath of the community. Our classes are also virtual and hybrid starting in the summer. And all of our youth classes are currently free of charge. So if you have any teens that are into creative writing, curious about creative writing, songwriting, poetry, fiction, send them our way. Be sure to check out the-muse.org and keep an eye out for us at some of the local festivals and conferences in the Hampton Roads area, because we will be at a few of those, which is very exciting, including the Seniors Writers Conference. And speaking of CNU, our moderator for tonight is the wonderful Jason Carney. He is a professor of creative writing at CNU, and we are also lucky to have him as a sci-fi, fantasy, and horror teacher at the Muse. He is an editor, as well as a professor and an author, and just an all-around really cool person, and he is going to be introducing our reader tonight. I will pass it to you, Jason.
Right. Thanks a lot, Susan. So yeah, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Chase Folmar, a writer that I've known for, oh, hi, Oliver, several years now. I think it's been about 4 years since I first met you in one of the Muse writing classes, so yeah. Mm-hmm. And then since then, Chase has been a regular contributor to Whetstone magazine, which is a free digital sword and sorcery zine. And his fiction is just excellent. It's in the reviews of the magazine, people talk about it as a highlight often. So thank you very much, Chase, for that. And what else can I say? I've read Frolic on the, I hope there's a lot of mispronouncing that's going to happen tonight. Frolic on the Amaranthyn twice now. Amaranthyn, there you go, twice now, and it was just like an excellent experience, and I'm looking forward to hearing some from you tonight. So yeah, introduce Chase.
All right, thank you. And first, I'd like to just give a big shout out to the Muse as an entity, just with all the classes and the writing groups and everything that they offer. I don't think this wouldn't have turned out the way that it did, or it might not have turned out at all in the first place. So I just want to give a big shout out to the Muse. So I'm going to be reading the first chapter of Frolic on the Amaranthyn, and then I'm going to be jumping to about chapter 4. Not reading the whole thing, just reading a little snippet to give a sense of the poetic language that you can, some of the best, in my opinion, poetic language you can hope to find in this book. So, and this is chapter 1. The Cadaverons were defeated, whereas the lonely mountain road had swarmed only moments prior with those exhumed and worm-rotted effigies of dead men. What remained of their gruesomeness now lay hacked in scattered heaps across the uneven path. Knots of necromantic twine, whose repellent touch had spurred disparate pieces of flesh into so paltry an imitation of life, were left sundered in uselessly twitching strands, unable to further animate the figures whom they had previously bound. A small company of armored men stood in the aftermath of that slaughter. Bloodied and haggard of breath, Each counted himself lucky to have survived so sudden an ambush along the mountain path. Wrapped like the coils of a great python around slopes flung indomitably up towards the darkening sky, the road had nearly choked them in its grasp when the flood of rot-riddled figures came clawing and gnashing with mindless fervor upon them, providing precious little space to mount a defense against an otherwise easily conquered foe. Now, with victory at length claimed, they warily gathered round the armored carriage in whose service they had marched these many days gone by, stealing hearty gulps from both water skins and flasks aflame with more tempestuous spirits alike. Little was spoken, the lot reeling from so harrowing an encounter, while thoughts of warm food, soft beds, and body company to be enjoyed at the end of this journey filled the prolonged silence between them. There then came from the cover of nearby trees a sudden rustling in the brush. Weapons drawn and leveled in anticipation for another threat, the men were thusly taken aback to see not a beast or conjured fiend emerge before them, but a woman. She appeared as if a goddess who deigned to tread the same ground as lowly mortals, stunning in the beauty she exuded, fair and supple as calla lilies in bloom, a scant dress of cerulean silk flowing down her figure. Without a moment's hesitation, she proceeded to skip about the cluster of men, showering each of their cheeks with a flurry of eager and passionately insistent kisses. Such heroes, such brave defenders of the helpless. Like a well-rehearsed song did her praises ring, from lips glistening potently with a darkly crimson sheen as she continued to extol their company. What fortune must stand by my side, that fate brought you to this road at precisely when I most needed aid. I know not how much longer I could have stayed hidden, helpless to fight those fiends who so ruthlessly pursued me, before your company came around the bend, a gallant force with swords and spears and steadfast shields. How glorious it was to see you slay creatures so foul as they. I knew I would find safety in your hands, and so I have. None of the battle-weathered men responded. With porcelain saucer eyes, they followed the swaying hips and flourishes of her shapely form as she danced between them, her crown of golden hair seeming to catch with every bounce those last splendid breaths of sunlight still peeking out over the horizon. Though entranced by her unexpected surprise, they were, after all, mercenaries by trade, whose loyalty lay only in that shining god of golden coin. Tempting as this woman was, they had no wish to incur their employer's displeasure by stepping beyond the parameters of previously ascribed duties, and so knew not how to proceed with the pleasantness of her arrival. It was as if the sheer radiance of her smile and the ruby marks left behind by her kisses had resulted in a sort of shared amnesia to the battle they had but recently escaped, and which had cut an initial force of 15 men at arms to a paltry 8. Likewise, none sought to question the reason as to why one so seemingly frail and unprepared for the wilderness had found her way to such a spot, nor how she had come to be pursued by the cadaverons in the first place. Such a spell of blindness, however, could not be said to have fallen over the entire company. One of their number, who'd borne the rank of captain when there had been a full retinue to command, yet retained some semblance of the situation at hand, so that when the woman's lips grazed his own weathered face, it snapped through the lure her presence had previously induced, and his expression darkened to an incredulous grimace. "Enough," he barked. "What is your business here, woman?" She stared at him with the innocence of one scolded for an impropriety they had unknowingly and ignorantly trespassed upon. "Must I beg for forgiveness at having occupied the wrong place at the wrong time? Is it a crime to have been hunted by evil and unnatural forces I know not from whence came, or for what purpose they were brought into being? Shall I proceed on alone down this path, falling swiftly under the spell of shadows now, after having so narrowly escaped death, and pray my luck hold strong against all the forces of nightly wilderness?" The captain could but scowl in return, for at that moment a hatch sealing shut one of the carriage windows swung open and allowed the portly visage of a sallow-faced man to peer through. "The danger is past?" By the vibrant raiment and the garish coiffer sprouted atop his head, it was apparent the speaker was an expatriate born of white-shored Iskallroon. Though fervid insistence burned in his beady eyes, scouring the grisly aftermath of battle, his voice still squawked with a shrill and trembling tenor, betraying the nervousness clearly buried so shallowly beneath. Though his fiery gaze alighted first upon the mercenary captain, it was only a matter of seconds before that blaze drifted to the woman beside him, the long locks fluttering with the breeze across the striking, heart-shaped face, in a dress wonderfully delicate in design, which hugged tight all those places to best attract the wandering eye. The smoldering ire softened, and an ember of a different sort was quickly stoked in its place. Hello, hello. Who is this that so graces us with her presence? One who is eternally grateful unto you, venerable liege. The woman eagerly approached the window with her most reverent, most alluring gait, as if she had expected his appearance all along, and curtsied low when she stood before him. With eyes sparkling like the ocean beneath the cloudless summer day, did she entreat the Eupatriid into their full and shimmering depth, and she beamed brighter still as she addressed him. I offer my name as Emrasarie, willful traveler along these isolated roads. I owe my life to your swordsmen for the role they played in my rescue, and to you, perhaps even more so, for having brought them here at my hour of need. Were it not for your arrival, I would no doubt have perished only moments ago. Let us thank fate that such misfortune did not befall one so beautiful as you, grinned the Eupatriid as he drank in the sight of her. Many before have lauded the gracious and benefactory quality of my name, which I am pleased to offer as Uralant and Emrasarie. It warms my heart that you are now among those who know its quality as well. Emrasarie gave a bashful chirp of laughter. Before she could further weave her flattery, however, the mercenary captain lumbered forward and sidestepped around to speak directly with the enraptured Eupatriid. Eminency, nightfall will be upon us soon, he spoke tersely, all the while glancing at Emrasarie from the corner of his eye. We are yet several hours at least from the Uralant, and unless we wish to sleep beneath the stars tonight, I would counsel we make towards civilization with haste, before the wilds of the Uralant mountains rise fully against our progress. Uralant and Emrasarie, his gaze momentarily stolen from Emrasarie, looked out across the waiting road ahead and gave a nod in return. As if fearful of his attention slipping further adrift, Emrasarie then threw herself forward beneath the Eupatriid's window, clasping her hands together in hopeful supplication. Pardon my intrusion, she began anew, but did I hear your destination to be Uralant? So is it mine, before those cadaverons fell against me. Perchance, most gracious eminency, might I request the honor of traveling alongside your retinue until at least we reach the city? I will be off my own way then at once, never to disturb the path of your travels again. Mounting distrust narrowed the captain's eyes, though it did not seem to trouble Emrasarie in the least. She was cognizant of the Eupatriid's face only, and when there passed the leer of self-satisfied amusement across the man's heavy jowls, at her request, so too did a smile similar in kind flash across the fullness of her own cheeks. Your appearance is no disturbance, but an honor to my company, Uralant and Emrasarie bellowed brightly from atop his seat. Please, after such an experience as you have endured, share in what little comfort I might provide, and ride with me for the remainder of our journey. Locks were unclasped, knobs jostled, and the heavy-plated door of the carriage then swung ajar. Yet before Emrasarie could take a single step forward, the captain swooped between, barring her way with a hand that had found its way to the hilt of his blade. Is that wise, eminency? We know not what this woman's intentions may be, or the reason we happened to find her here. By her own words, it was she that cadaveron so ruthlessly pursued. What if ill omens flock about her, and she draws towards our weakened band more misfortune than we can manage? Uralant and Emrasarie loosed an indignant scoff at the presented notion, and swatted flippantly at the air. Bah, cease such a name prattle. Can you not see this woman is helpless here amidst the wilderness? Now, step aside and allow her to enter. You would not desire your payment to reflect any insubordination of my wishes now, would you? Talk of golden-faced creoles, particularly the threat of their quantity being in any way diminished, quelled immediately the captain's defiance. With resigned loyalty did he step aside, and Uralant and Emrasarie leaned down to offer Emrasarie his hand in a grand show of gallantry. The golden-haired woman performed her own masterpiece in turn, taking with sweet and charming flourish those bloated fingers stuffed into the grip of so many gem-studded rings. The carriage interior had space enough to fit four comfortably, and was lavishly decorated with periwinkle cushions and pillowed seats embroidered in Sundranali silk. Her smile unwavering, Emrasarie followed the guiding pull of her host and dropped to the seat beside him. All the while did her sing-song voice dance about in thanks and gratitude, and she made certain to offer forth her forgiveness in lacking those proper forms of etiquette, so refined a Eupatriid as he no doubt cherished. Swept along by the disarming sincerity of her words, Uralant and Emrasarie's own tone fell into that self-assured air of vanity as befalls so many to whom rank and status has been blindly given. And he assured her, as one might a child willfully unlearned in the esoteric rules of some complex game, that no impropriety could ever be committed by one so lovely as her. Thusly securing the carriage, the Eupatrid bid his company to carry on towards their destination, bringing out from a drawer overhead a small cask of wine and several glasses as he did. The captain scowled with brazen displeasure at the sight of Emrasarie visible there through the open window, the heavy lines on his face only just able to hide a faint tinge of red creeping along the cheek which she had earlier kissed. Catching his lingering stare upon her, the woman cast a coquettish wave his direction before he spun and lumbered off ahead. So that's the first chapter. And we're going to be jumping ahead a little bit. And to give some context to the situation, both the characters that was introduced there, Emrasarie, basically in this section, all the characters on the front of the book are all gathered together at this point. This is one of the antagonists, the sorcerer, and they are standing. The two main characters have been captured by that sorcerer, and so that is the overall context for this next scene. The sorcerer beckoned them to join him on the balcony. Though her skin crawled to do so, Emrasarie obeyed, with Uralant following close as a shadow behind. From so high a perch, the seemingly limitless lanterns of Lucrana were spread like stars captured within the capricious and dazzling surface of an opal. Each street shone as bright as the one preceding it, their varied colors coruscating together until the whole city flared as if a beacon within the veil, a solitary spark of civilization warding back the black waves of encroaching wilderness beyond. They were close to the Amaranthyn here, 2 or 3 avenues at most, and looking that way, Emrasarie marveled at the sheer breadth the river had swelled to at this junction. From shore to shore, it reached such a distance as to resemble more an idle lake than a coursing river, and its waters were carpeted by great swirling strokes of lotus blossoms. Their petals had been stained to purple beneath the lights cast by the lunar triune emerged in full overhead, and in places the colubrine current shimmered as if a ribbon of fine, vibrantly fuscous silk draped out across the earth. That luster, however, was slowly beginning to fade. A heavy wall of mist poured across the river from further upstream, and submerged beneath it the violet currents flowing so slowly by. Uncertain as to what could cause such a phenomenon, Emrasarie suddenly spied something within the distant plumes of rolling vapor, a faint yet tangible shape drifting in tow with the obscuring clouds that so thoroughly enveloped it. As if trepidatious to fully reveal itself yet, the object crawled with sluggish insistence ahead until, drawing abreast Lucrana and its many riverside streets, it tore through the clinging veil and revealed itself in full. Beautiful, is it not? The sorcerer mused beside her. She had no words to answer. Her breath failed, stolen by that strangest of sensations, when awe and uneasiness throw themselves against one another in terrifying clamor. Attempting to make sense of the structure and the monstrous vessel it sprawled atop, she found herself returned to past conversations at the pillow with clients fanatically devoted to the hidden language behind aesthetics and the nature of beauty, particularly in regards to its relationship with artifice. Among poets, philosophers, and statesmen of deftly honed rhetoric, the prevailing thought had gone that no matter how great mankind's conceit grew against the earthen cradle from which he'd first arisen, ever was there the desire to replicate in his own wonders the same sublime effortlessness seen throughout the natural world. So as a flower bursts into brilliance from a mere seed without exterior aid, so then would a sculptor, painter, or architect also wish their creation to appear as an act of sheer and unrestrained spontaneity, rather than the result of hands laboring at the behest of ponderous intent. Simplicity sat ever entwined with elegance upon the pedestal erected by those sharp-eyed aesthetes, and to deviate from that path, set out by the grand tapestry of existence connecting all things together, was to court disaster. This feat of creation, and the way it erupted from the lotus-choked waters as if a fountain of flawlessly wrought, iridescent steel, seemed instead a complete and flagrant repudiation of such thinking. Somewhere within stupendously sheer walls and angles cut into one another with painfully rigid abruptness, Emrasarie recognized what appeared to be an amphitheater in intent. Its interior remained sealed away behind discordant aspects of construction and daunting geometric theorems, their individual facets holding firm a totality unable to have been conceived by anything other than the willful hubris of man. Its highest points pierced the sky in vaunted spires, dizzying in their attempts to follow, while along the perimeter were spread supporting arcs, soaring past the point of functional belief. Emrasarie could not imagine the minds able to envision what her own eyes struggled to comprehend, nor believe the sheer ingenuity needed to fit all its pieces together. It was not, she dreaded to surmise, the shadow of men merely drunk on vanity that lurked at the heart of this thing's design. Only as a result of deranged and maniac autolatry could such a construct have been born. That complete severance of the soul from earthly surroundings, after which fires stoked of disgust seek to expel its bearers from the self-consuming coil which remains the world, and dwell, instead, unencumbered in deific splendor from on high. And that's where I'm gonna stop reading for now.
Nobody else can do the audio clapping. I'll do that. It's really interesting hearing you read it. I don't know if it was intentional, but I think there's definitely a rhythm of meter. Like, I'm not sure if you were writing it so there was a rhythm, but I don't know. There's something there. It's maybe you accidentally fell into poetry, but so yeah. Should we do some Q&A now?
Yeah, sure.
So maybe I'm not sure if people know how to do this, but there is a Q&A tab. You can put questions in, and I'll attend to those, and also you can put it into the chat. I guess we prefer the Q&A, but it doesn't matter if you put it in the chat too. But while people are coming up with a question, maybe I'll start with the standard question. Yeah, I saw there's the epitaph to Gene Wolfe in the opening of the novella. I'm sorry. Can you speak a little bit about some of your influences that you like maybe inspired you to write this, and that like maybe even after you finished the novella, like, oh, sometimes you realize that you've been inspired by something that maybe you hadn't thought of as you were writing, but maybe just some general commentary on influences.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, with specifically with that, with the epitaph or epigram at the beginning, I really liked that one because it was a really interesting way, and I guess I should probably read it for the context of
Sure.
So the epigram that I use at the beginning is, there are beings and artifacts against which we batter our intelligence raw, and in the end make peace with reality only by saying it was an apparition, a thing of beauty and horror. And I really like that because to me it was like a very succinct condensing of one of the viewpoint of one of my other favorite authors, H.P. Lovecraft. And one of his most famous quotes from one of his most famous stories is, in the Call of Cthulhu, where it talks about how the most merciful thing in the world is the inability of the human mind to correlate all its contents. We live in a placid sea of ignorance, and it goes on, but it's basically talking about how there are things that are beyond our understanding, and if we try seeking them out and trying to understand them, it won't go well. Like we can't really comprehend those sorts of things. And so yeah, like that really inspired me, both from Lovecraft's perspective of like the horror being rooted in usually what is, the terrifying, the scary, the monstrous. And what I really appreciate about that quote, and what Gene Wolfe does a lot that I've really gravitated towards and taken influence from, is with what he says in that quote, where it can be a thing of beauty and horror. And so it's like taking something that is usually, especially when you look at like older literature, beauty and attractiveness and all these sorts of things is very much coded to equal goodness and like virtuousness. And, there's the idea that, that can be, it can be the opposite, where, things that are very appealing can be very, very dangerous, in fact. But yeah, in terms of like other influences, like, I think that, once I start going through them, there'll be a big commonality of the richness of prose. So, like H.P. Lovecraft, Gene Wolfe, Clark Ashton Smith, Jack Vance, Lord Dunsany, all these guys who, most of them are very much, late 19th, early 20th century writers. And they have such a way with the words that they use, and the idea that storytelling is not just about the plot or the things that happens. It's the way that the plot reveals itself through the words that you read and through the artistry of trying to combine like the words that you use on the page as part of the artistry itself, so. And then another, like one of the big, I would say one of the big influences for me, because, I'd read Lovecraft, and I'd read especially like Clark Ashton Smith pretty early on, and I really liked them. But in terms of the way that I've been trying to write with this novella and with a lot of my short stories, even when I had read those, the sort of, sort of archaic vernacular and the sort of poetic, almost like very loosely poetic meter that, you can sometimes hear in it, didn't really solidify itself until I read E.R. Edison's The Worm or Boris. Something about that one, even though that's like the furthest example of something that is incredibly difficult to read, because that one is a fantasy book that is basically written as if a Shakespearean play, but in prose. So there are the points where you like almost need to sit down and translate what he's saying or what's happening in a scene, even though it's taking place in English. But yeah, I'd say those are some of my main influences.
Have you read? There are 4 questions, so I'm going to move on. But I guess I won't ask a question because I want to have other people's questions. But I get some M.R. James in there too, and I'm also hearing like the theme of like being attracted towards something dangerous. Like that's an M.R. James thing as well. Like it can be beautiful, but that it's going to end bad for you when you shoot. And I don't know if anybody has read it already. The first chapter, it ends where this guy has brought this beautiful woman into his carriage. So maybe things don't end very well for him. But anyhow, to start with the questions from the attendees, Oliver asks, did you find yourself thinking about the rhythm of your prose at any point while writing? I find I struggle to do that myself.
I don't know if it kind of just happens naturally for me. That's it. It's most of the time it ends up just happening. That's the way that it comes down on the page, or especially when I go through the editing process, that's just how I naturally want it to sound. And it makes it, like, I think it works pretty well here. Whenever I've tried branching out into trying to write in a more like contemporary setting for more, mainstream type things, I think that ends up as a problem because it's not exactly conducive to the way that most modern writing markets are interested in things. I don't know. I don't know if I consciously think about it in the moment, but it's definitely something I aim towards. It's definitely something that I have an ear for. Like I will be writing a sentence and it won't sound right to me if there's like an accent mark missing somewhere, or if there's like a syllable missing somewhere. And it almost, sometimes it's like, all right, what can I just like jam in here to make it almost just sound better, as opposed to, whether or not it actually needs to be in there. But to me, it's like the sound impact of that almost needs to be there. So yeah.
Very interesting. So it's like you're creating acoustic artifacts rather than kind of just written artifacts. Interesting. Vince Garoli asks, what authors are your top influences for styles of prose? What authors inspire you to write this type of story? Yeah, and just maybe we've kind of explored this already, but maybe just add on one that you wish you could have said.
This kind of piggybacks off that, and a question, part of your question earlier too, Jason, of like things that ended up being influences that I wouldn't have expected. The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Because that very much plays into the idea of beauty equating to something horrible. And yeah, and I would say another big one, which isn't in any way, this is more of like on the weird fiction side of things rather than the fantasy side of things, was Arthur Machen. A lot of his prose very much, it's something that I very much try to not really emulate, but I take a lot of inspiration from. It's that sort of late 19th century, early 20th, fin de siècle, I think is the sort of like phrase for it. Yeah, exactly. It's like this overindulgence in the words that you use, where the actual like plot of the story is, almost buried beneath the descriptive prose and everything. So
if you go looking for the story in the thick prose, it's horrifying. You're thinking of the great god Pan. There also, I've noticed, maybe you inherited from Machen this, that in your reading you had the passage where you reflected on almost like art philosophy. There's that paragraph about nature versus artifice, and that felt like something Machen would do. It looks like Elliot is asking, I was curious about the book cover art. Could we have another little sneak peek at it? Who did the cover art? I like the cover art as well.
Yeah, you can also, this is not the greatest quality of video right now, but you can just go to the website or go on Amazon or any of the places and to see like an actually good picture. And the cover art was done by this guy named Goran Gligovic or Gligovich, this artist who I found on Twitter. It's one of the main things I use Twitter for, is like finding interesting artwork. and so like, I'd been keeping an eye out for like scouring through, all these different people who I follow, just trying to find someone who I felt like would be a good fit for the sort of tone, the sort of vibe, and the sort of style that I wanted for this. And he was one of the main ones that I was thinking of. And he does a lot of really good stuff. I know I've shared before, which this kind of related to this. He's done these this series basically of imagining doing like still shots of an animated Elric of Melnibone or Melnibone TV show almost, and those are really cool to see because it's a little bit like that artwork, but I don't know, it's like these awesome still shots of an animated cartoon show. So
interesting. Yeah, I actually think the cover art harmonizes with your writing style. It's almost like stylized is how it's like, it's not pure realism. It's nothing against some of these covers, but some of these covers where you can tell it started off as a photograph and then it's been processed through all sorts of like filters. This is clearly like complete artifice, right? It starts as a sketch, and it's not there's not a lot of like shadow. It's stylized. Yeah.
I specifically went into it with I specifically went into looking for this stuff, not wanting exactly that sort of cover. So
it's almost like a tarot card or something. Like the tarot card would be the lovers beset by the sorcerer tarot card. Like if there's like a So next question is by James T. And I know who this is, but I don't want to dox anyone, so I'm not going to. I know your last name, James T., but I'm going to just leave it at James T.
Yeah.
So you mentioned on Oliver Brackenbury's podcast, So I'm Writing a Novel, which is an excellent podcast, that this started life as a submission for Tales from the Magician's Skull, which is a really great sword and sorcery magazine, and it blossomed into this novella. My favorite sequence is the Uralant the Untamed dialogue. I believe that's on the back of the book with the guards. Was that in the original draft? Was that something you added later? Did you always have a singular vision for the sequence, or was it rewritten many times?
That one did actually. That one was added when it changed to the novella form, because the final product that we have right now is about 28,000 words long, and when it was in the submission for the Magician's Skull, it was about 10,000. So I had to, the overall like structure of things, like the overall arc, I would say, of the story remained pretty consistent, but there had to be a lot of stuff that was added to both propel the story forward in a much more, and to propel the story forward in a much more organic and more related to the actual characters way. Like basically the sorcerer who I was talking about, who appears on the front cover, and he got added in this new version. So yeah, that was something that came in after the fact when I was changing the format. So
actually, there's another Q&A question. I'm going to insert one in myself here before we go to that one, because this is because I want to ask about this anyway. Can you say a little bit about your writing process? You got a little bit about in there regarding like revision, but just in general, like coming up with the idea, even the nuts and bolts stuff. Like, is there a word processor that you use? Do you print when you revise? Things like that.
Yeah, so it usually starts off where I'll have the idea, and usually, honestly, most of the time, the ideas come from either like old works of art, new works of art, or like sometimes they'll come from like philosophical ideas that I've heard about in some podcasts I've listened to, or so just something vague like that. Then what usually happens is I'll try to, when I first start trying to go at something, I'll usually handwrite it. I will either take a notebook, sheet of paper, anything like that. I'll usually start trying to just jot out anything that I can think of, just random ideas, random sentences. And then usually it happens to where I'll get to a certain point there, and then I'll start typing it up. And I think that helps with me a lot, because I have a bad habit sometimes of thinking that the first time of writing something, it needs to be perfect the first time. And so I think that when I'm jumping in between different formats, whether it's like handwriting or typing, it kind of gives me that sort of distance and break that I need. And that's a big thing too, is like there'll be times where I'm handwriting or typing and I'll start just getting kind of stuck. I'll start just feeling a little bit unmotivated, or feeling like I don't know where to go from here. And then usually what helps for me is switching up that format. So like if I'm handwriting and I'm starting to have trouble, I'll switch to typing. If I'm typing and I start having trouble, I'll switch to going back to handwriting. And then, yeah, like during the revision process, printing the stuff out at certain points definitely starts to help. It definitely helps like visualize it in a different medium. And I know you saw these, the sort of author proof copies that I made early on. Like that I went through, you can do this either through KDP, or the way that I did it was through Barnes and Noble Press. If you once you have like essentially like the finished a draft of the finished manuscript, if you have it like formatted right, for I think mine was 5x8 dimension book, you can format it together and upload it to either Barnes and Noble Press or KDP, and they will just print a book for you, and for that helped immensely in terms of seeing things that I didn't see before, like portions that when I was either scrolling through the Word document or even printed out, I would just start glazing over just because I've been reading through it so many different times. But then like actually having that physical copy of the product there completely reframes it to where I'm like, oh God, this needs to be better. This should be like a professional thing. And it's still like very much in the rough phases, like, and everything. So
somebody will actually read this.
Yeah.
This is
be
read by people. It changes the way you think about your writing. Absolutely. I'm totally going to steal that, going from hand to screen to different forms. That's awesome. So another question from the Q&A. This is by Philip Hall. Wants to know, when does your next novel come out? And then can I add to that, are you interested in writing novels as opposed to novellas and short fiction? And do you think your style would change if you were to write in these longer forms?
Yeah, so the next one, I don't know exactly when it's coming out. I have ideas for the next one. I have an idea of, and the next one would be another novella. I actually have this idea of 2 more novellas after this one, that would all be loosely related in terms of taking place within the same sort of setting, but not focusing me on the same characters. But those are both just very much still in the brainstorming. And I think the one I have planned next is I've started writing a little bit of it, but haven't gotten too far into it. In terms of a novel, I would want to try to write a novel. I have some ideas that I could do for that. But the issue if
it's going to be a fantasy novel, it must be 500 pages or more. So just prepare yourself.
I know. No, that has to be 800 pages or more. Yeah, and that's exactly the thing, is that I don't know, with the way that I write, that might be like a bit too much. That might be a bit too dense, like, to not only for the reader, but for me, trying to like carry that sort of momentum with the way that I've been writing and everything. I might have to reorientate myself in some ways to try to do that. So I definitely want to, but
so it's been a long day, so my memory's not working very well, but I believe you've published 3 or 4 stories in Whetstone. All of them are obviously they're sword and sorcery. Do they all take place in the same secondary world? And is it just Easter eggs relationships, or have you decided to create a cohesive, fully established secondary world, which is what a lot of fantasy writers do?
It is, yeah, they all take place in the same world. I believe that there are 3 Whetstone stories, and one of them has the characters that show up in this book in it. Emrasarie
and the Queen Imperial, I know that too.
Yeah. I would say that it's more than Easter eggs, but less than a fully realized complete setting. Like I have like a through line story that's been going on, and there's like definitely events that are referenced and characters that are referenced, but I like, and I want to try to maintain the fact that I think that you can read any single one of these stories completely by itself, and you don't need the sort of the extra knowledge the extra context, it would be a little bit more like rewarding you for reading all of them, but not making it a necessity. I think there's an author, I think Steven Erikson, his Malazan Book of the Fallen fantasy series. I haven't read those, but I know that I think the conceit of those is that all these novels they take place in the same world, but they aren't related to each other at all. So I guess it's a little bit like that. So
it's interesting. Yeah, I tried to read Gardens of the Moon, but I couldn't get to it. It was too long. But so I can't speak to if you need to know the world, but I find that really intriguing. And so James T asks, to add to the process question, do you listen to music when you write, or do you write, or do you like it silent, or do you have any other kind of ritual that gets you in the right headspace for creating?
I definitely don't listen to music while I write. I find that I can't do that at all. I'll just start listening to the music. I do take a lot of inspiration from music though too. That's one of the big things. One of the things I listen to a lot of is metal, and
okay. Hard to write to.
Huh?
It's hard to write to if you have your metal.
Yeah, a little bit. But I feel like there's a bit of commonality with that and my writing style, where they're both very kind of like not immediately appealing, or not immediately like it might be a little bit harder to get into them, but then once you do get into it, I feel like it can be pretty rewarding. So yeah, and then in terms of getting in the right headspace, I find that. So I work from home, so I'm sitting inside most of the day and staring at a computer. There's some days where I just need to, if I'm going to try to be creative and try to write something down, I need to get outside for a little bit. And usually the thing that I'll do is go for a run, mainly because one, it just gets you moving. It's the change of pace from everything, and then the second thing is that. For me, I usually don't listen to anything while I run, and so that makes it one of like the few times where there's no distractions going on. You're just completely in your own headspace, and you can kind of think about and ponder and work through just the different ideas and storytelling things that you want to focus on. So
interesting. Yeah. Also, James T had a note not to worry about the thinking it should be perfect the first time. I think we all do that.
Yeah.
Totally true. And then, so Maisie Ray asks a question that I legitimately am interested in hearing about is, so what is your favorite word and why? And this is the part that I'm really interested in, is how do you have such an extensive vocabulary? Like you, Patrid, I'm 40 years old, and that's the first time I've ever heard that word. So where did you discover that word? And it's just awesome too. So.
My favorite. I have a few different ones probably. I would say that the word that I've used this word a lot, esoteric. That's one that I have a fondness for. This one isn't too weird and out there, but visceral. I find myself using that one a lot. And yeah, another one that I found while writing this one is and I read it in one of the passages that I read was autolatry. I like that one a lot, and that's the it's basically just like the worship of oneself. I feel like that's a really good.
All writers are. Let's be honest.
Yeah. And in terms of how I find all the words, it's mainly through the stuff that I read. Like I was saying, with that one author I was talking about, E.R. Edison, and his Worm Ouroboros series. There's, like I said, that book is written in a diction and a vernacular that is intentionally like almost intentionally antiquated to almost Shakespearean era, so that there are words and phrases in that you have to just have your phone right beside you at all times to just Google through and try to find the words that he's meaning. Jack Vance does that a lot too, and Gene Wolfe as well. And that's one of my, for me personally, I love coming across a new word in those contexts and being able to look it up and write it down. And I've had conversations with some people where people wondering whether or not I think most of the time with their own work, wondering how much of that sort of practice you should go into, because how much do other readers want to come across new words that they don't know. And I mean, I don't know, like for me personally, I really like it. So there's got to be some people who really, really like it too. So
yeah, it's a kind of it has this effect of like antiquity. Like if you look at the Google I don't know what you call it, like the diagram that comes up when you look up an old word, you can see like there's this, you can actually see like a chart, and it'll be spiked in the 19th century, and this starts to completely trickle down. Then no one has used this word for the past 100 years. It's like,
yeah,
all right, well, I totally have to use this. But what that does is it throws people back to that previous. I mean, if it doesn't frustrate them, some people I think are alienated by it, but it achieves it. I use a pretentious phrase, and it achieves an interesting aesthetic effect, so.
Yeah, I've said this before, to where one of the reasons why I really like doing it is because it immediately creates a sense of otherworldliness. Mm-hmm. It creates a degree of this is gonna sound really weird, but verisimilitude for the unreal. Because when you come across these words that we don't use anymore, it makes it very clear that this is not this is very much like a secondary or very different world from our own. One of my biggest pet peeves for me personally is when people and writing styles in books are incredibly relatable, basically, when it's people basically talk how we talk now, when things are very I don't know, just very very relatable, and very much like you could just like drop a conversation that normal people have into this completely fantastical world, and it's just like, wait, what?
Yeah, I won't name any names, but I've read some D&D novels where a wizard will exclaim "dude" or something like that.
Oh no.
I think that's what you mean.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, so yeah, we have time for a couple more. Oliver Brackenbury asks, once again, that Oliver, you have a great podcast. I like your podcast. Do you own the Jack Vance lexicon? Will there one day be a Chase A. Folmar lexicon? And seriously, how do you feel about straight up inventing words, as Vance so often did? And can I ask, will you admit to inventing any words as you wrote?
Oh man. So I do not own the Jack Vance lexicon. I kind of wish I did. I also wish I owned, there's for Gene Wolfe's Book of the New Sun series, there's the same sort of thing called the Lexicon Earthus, where it has all his weird and made up words. And in terms of, I intentionally tried not making up any words for this one. I think one of the words that I might have stretched or like made up is so in the sort of the backstory of this world, there's an event referenced called the Phlegathon, which is a reference to in ancient Greek mythology. The Phlegathon is one of the rivers of the underworld, and it's a burning river, a river of fire, basically. And in mine, and so I've used it in a way of there's something that happened in the deep history of this world where basically something from the sky falling down. And so, you could very much imagine like a meteor or something like that, and it creating an effect of a river of fire burning through the sky. And I took that as, I wanted to use that because I didn't want to use something generic like cataclysm or anything like that. And I figured cataclysm in of itself is rooted in flood. The etymology of that is very much tied into the biblical flood mythology. So I figured that it would be fine. It could be interesting and cool using something like that. And so I'm in one of a word that I use that probably it's definitely made up. It definitely doesn't exist as an actual word, but related to the flood imagery and everything. One of the big words that a lot of weird fiction and sword and sorcery authors use a lot of the time is antediluvian. So it's like basically means like the etymology of that is before the flood. So it means like ancient times, very prehistory basically. And so I tried to make this word to where instead of relating it to a flood, it was to this described a phlegathon that I was talking about. So I made it like, I think it was anti-phlegathontal, which basically would mean before this event. So that would be like the main word that I made up. But I found that I'm not opposed to making up words, but at least with this one, I didn't want to do that because I have seen I've seen some people's books on Amazon or something to where at the very beginning, they have like a glossary of terms, and, that's fine for them. I think one of the reasons why I appreciate and why I lean so much into using these old antiquated words is that it kind of can convey the same sort of impression without it seeming completely out of nowhere. Like you can kind of still like glean through context and glean through like the way that it fits into the sentence, that you can kind of still understand what the intended meaning is supposed to be through that, as opposed to just having a random word that you then have to describe or define later on. So
yeah, those little touches like that, like the tiny brushstrokes, like a single word, it's like the aroma of an old book, in writing, or like the parchment paper that you have to open when you get to the book plate in the really old book. Like I feel like you can achieve that same effect, and you, for me at least, you totally achieve that effect in your diction.
thank you.
So yeah, it's 7:58. There are no other questions in the Q&A. Does anybody have any last questions? Okay, there's Susan. All right, well,
I've come back. I'm a huge etymology nerd. No, you're good. I'm a big etymology nerd, so I've just been in the background kind of going like this the whole time. I also think, just one observation before we run out of time, I think it's really interesting to root such a kind of fantastical world in the history of our own world through language. That just seems like a really cool kind of facet. But thank you both so much. This has been a wonderful reading and an amazing conversation. And Chase, congrats again. Frolic on the Amaranthyn. I have stolen the Muse copy, but this will be in the Muse library and also in the links that I posted both in the Zoom chat and in the Facebook Live. So definitely go grab your own copy. Check out the cool cover art. And everyone, thank you so much for joining us both live in Zoom and on Facebook. And for those who are watching after the fact, thank you. And everyone, have a lovely night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you.